How many times have you lost sleep replaying someone's words in your mind? How many hours of life have you wasted trying to justify yourself, to prove you were right, to be accepted? This is psychic energy leaking away. And as Jung said, what you resist persists. The more you react, the more you confirm to the world that they can control you. But imagine instead that you knew this. No insult defines you. No rejection diminishes you. No abandonment destroys you. What happens then? Suddenly, you are untouchable. Not because you hide, not because you become cold, but because you finally see the truth, that all external attacks are empty if they don't find a wound inside to stick to. This is why manipulative people panic when you stop reacting, because they realize they cannot access your buttons anymore. The insults, the guilt, the silent games, none of it penetrates, and so the mask they placed on you falls apart. Now they must face their own emptiness, their own shadow. And that is unbearable.
Carl Jung said something powerful. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And hidden within this phrase is the seed of the change. Because what truly wounds us is never the external event, the insult, the betrayal, the judgment. What hurts is the way we identify with it, the way we let the outside world dictate who we are. The day you stop giving events this authority, the day you discover that no one has the key to your inner world, that's the day everything changes. Think of it this way. When someone criticizes you harshly, the sound of their words is nothing but vibrations in the air. They have no weight, no poison, no power until you let those words take root inside you. It's like an arrow that only pierces if you decide not to raise your shield. And what is this shield? The awareness that you cannot be defined or diminished by what comes from outside. But here's the paradox. Since childhood, you've been taught the opposite. Taught to fear rejection, to tremble at the thought of failure, to obey the voices of authority so that you wouldn't be punished. You were trained to seek safety not within yourself, but in the approval of others. And in this way, you grew up fragile, dependent, constantly at risk of being hurt. A single word from someone you admire can raise you to heaven or throw you into despair. A single gesture of abandonment can make you feel worthless. Do you see how dangerous this is?
This conditioning creates an invisible prison. You believe you are protecting yourself, when in truth, you are enslaving yourself. The fear of being hurt keeps you in relationships you no longer want, in jobs that consume you, in behaviors that betray your essence. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, it's because you are afraid of disappointing. Every time you hold back your truth, it's because you are afraid of being rejected. Every time you accept crumbs of affection, it's because you are terrified of being left behind. And all of this, absolutely all of it, comes from the same root, the illusion that you can be hurt. But let me tell you the uncomfortable truth. Nobody can actually wound you. They can offend, yes. They can reject you, yes. They can betray you, abandon you, criticize you. But none of that can touch the essence of who you are. It only becomes a wound if you let it penetrate your inner world. And that's where the shift begins. When you realize that the greatest suffering in your life was never caused by others, but by the way you carried their actions inside you, you wake up. When you see that no one has ever truly touched your essence, you breathe differently. You are free. You are no longer at the mercy of moods, criticisms, or opinions. You start to live with a sovereignty that most people will never know.
Jung understood this as the foundation of individuation, the process of becoming whole. Because how can you be whole if every little word from the outside world has the power to break you? How can you be free if your peace depends on others treating you with care? Freedom begins when you see the lie. You are not fragile. You are not breakable. You are not at the mercy of anyone. The world will still throw its stones, yes, but when you finally realize they can no longer reach you, something extraordinary happens. You stop running. You stop begging. You stop explaining. And for the first time, you stand where you are with the unshakable certainty that nothing and nobody can truly hurt you. If the truth is that nothing and nobody can hurt you, why do you still feel so fragile? Why do you wake up anxious, afraid of what others will think, afraid of failing, afraid of disappointing? If the essence of who you are is untouchable, why does life sometimes seem like a minefield where every step could explode in your face? The answer is unsettling, because you were trained to believe in your fragility. Since childhood, the world whispered in your ear that you needed to obey, conform, and adapt to be accepted. And in that process, you learn to confuse safety with submission.
Think about it. As a child, what did you fear most? Disappointing your parents, being scolded at school, losing a friend's approval. It wasn't physical pain that kept you awake at night, it was emotional pain. The pain of being left out, of being rejected, of not being good enough. And that fear was so intense that little by little you built a mask of the good boy, the dedicated student, the pleasant friend. A mask designed not to reflect your truth, but to avoid rejection. And here lies the invisible prison. Because once you start living to avoid pain, you are no longer living, you are only surviving. Your choices stop being yours, your voice is silenced, your power dissolves. Everything is filtered through the lens of fear. If I say this, will they get angry? If I refuse, will they abandon me? If I fail, will I be ridiculed? This constant vigilance consumes you more than any external wound ever could. Jung said that what you repress doesn't disappear, it becomes shadow. And that's what happened with your fear. You didn't overcome it, you hid it. On the outside, you smile, you say everything is fine, you play your roles. But inside, there's a terrified child still begging not to be hurt. And this child silently dictates your life.
That's why you stay in relationships that no longer nourish you, because leaving would mean facing rejection. That's why you accept jobs that drain your soul, because failing would mean losing your worth. That's why you silence your deepest desires, because expressing them could mean ridicule. Fear ties you up. Fear blinds you. Fear makes you believe that the prison cell where you live is the safest place in the world. But have you noticed the paradox? The more you try to avoid being hurt, the more you suffer. You avoid conflict, but inside you feel suffocated. You avoid risks, but inside you feel empty. You avoid rejection, but inside you feel invisible. The very strategy you use to protect yourself is the one that keeps you in pain. It's like being in a cage with the door wide open. At any moment, you could walk out, but the fear of what lies outside keeps you paralyzed. So you stay inside, convincing yourself that the bars are protection, when in fact they are your sentence. And here comes the most shocking part. Most people will live their entire lives without ever realizing this. They will keep believing that safety is in others' approval. They will keep negotiating their essence for a crumb of acceptance. They will keep passing this fear on to the next generation, perpetuating the same prison.
But if you are listening to this now, it's because a crack has already opened. Something inside you already suspects that there is another way. Because if fear was truly your protector, why do you feel so imprisoned? If approval was truly the source of your value, why do you feel so empty even when praised? If avoiding pain was truly the key to happiness, why do you still suffer? The truth is clear. Fear never protected you. It only made you small. It only made you dependent. It only made you fragile. And the day you see that this fragility is nothing but conditioning, you start to breathe differently. You begin to understand what Jung meant when he said that nothing external has the power to define you. Because the only real wound you carry is the wound of believing that you can be wounded. And once you dismantle that belief, the walls of the prison collapse. You don't need anyone's permission to be who you are. You don't need safety guaranteed by others. You don't need to live terrified of rejection, because you finally understand the bars were always imaginary. The door was always open. And walking out of that cage may be scary, yes, but it is also the only way to live.
If nothing and nobody can truly hurt you, why do you still feel the weight of others' opinions pressing on your chest? Why does a single criticism sometimes seem sharper than a knife? Why does someone's silence leave you more restless than days of solitude? The answer lies in something Jung called psychic energy. Every time you give attention, every time you react, every time you let someone's words stir your emotions, you are investing energy in that person. And here's the cruel truth. Most of the time, you're not aware of how much you're spending. Think of your energy as currency. Each morning, you wake up with a full wallet. But instead of using it to build your dreams, to nurture your inner strength, you hand it out to anyone who crosses your path. A careless comment from a colleague, there goes a coin. A meaningless argument online, there goes another. A memory of something that hurt you years ago, more and more coins thrown away. At the end of the day, you're broke, and the ones who enriched themselves were the shadows feeding on your fear. And here's where manipulation is born. Because the moment someone realizes that they can affect you, they gain power over you. They don't need to attack you physically. They don't need to chain your body. All they need to do is press the right buttons, and you'll do the rest yourself.
Look around. The entire structure of society is built on this principle. Advertising makes you believe that you're incomplete without a product. Politics makes you believe that you're unsafe without a leader. Religion makes you believe that you're condemned without an intermediary. Families, companies, relationships, everyone, consciously or not, plays with the same lever: fear.
fear of being excluded, fear of being abandoned, fear of being unloved. And while you tremble, while you react, while you try to defend yourself, your energy is drained. Jung taught that what we project onto others is nothing more than a reflection of what we haven't integrated within ourselves. That's why criticism cuts you, because it touches an insecurity you haven't yet healed. That's why rejection paralyzes you, because it awakens the child inside who still doubts their worth. That's why silence torments you, because it exposes how much you still depend on external validation. The other person is just the trigger. The wound was already there. And while you don't realize this, you'll keep giving power to those triggers. You'll keep living like a puppet tied to invisible strings, moved not by your will, but by the fear of being hurt. But here lies the turning point. When you realize that nothing external can hurt you, the game changes. Because instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of giving your energy away, you conserve it. Instead of wasting your power on shadows, you reclaim it for yourself. Think of the last time someone tried to offend you. If, instead of taking it personally, you simply saw it as a projection of their own pain, what would happen? Their arrow would fall before reaching you. Their words would dissolve into silence. Their power would vanish instantly. Because there's nothing more frustrating to a manipulator than an inalterable spirit. It's like trying to stab water. No matter how hard you try, it never bleeds. It never breaks. It never loses its essence. And that's what you become when you stop giving your energy away. An ocean. Untouchable, unfathomable, whole. At this point, the manipulator disappears, because without your reaction, without your fear, without your psychic energy being delivered to them, they lose all control. And then something extraordinary happens. You realize that most of the monsters that chased you were nothing more than shadows projected on the wall of your mind. The fear was never in them, it was always in you.
And when this truth hits you, something shifts forever. Because you understand that the real prison guard was never the other. It was your own belief that you could be hurt. It was your own habit of giving your power away. And at the moment you stop doing that, a strange, almost divine silence arises inside you. The arrows keep coming, but they no longer pierce. The words echo, but they no longer shake. The manipulations multiply, but they no longer catch you. Because the moment you reclaim your energy, you reclaim yourself. And from there, nothing and nobody can control you anymore. There is a weapon more powerful than words, more disarming than arguments, more transformative than any act of defense. That weapon is silence. We live in a culture obsessed with noise. Everyone wants to respond, to justify, to prove that they are right. From family dinners to political debates, from social media to intimate relationships, everyone is talking. Few are listening. And in the middle of this storm of voices, silence becomes unbearable. So unbearable that whoever dares to sustain it gains an unimaginable power. But why does silence frighten so much? Because silence is a mirror. It reflects back to the other everything they don't want to see. It forces them to face their own emptiness, their own incoherence, their own hidden wounds. That's why many people prefer shouting to listening, accusing to pausing, attacking to contemplating. Noise is easier than truth.
Now imagine this. Someone criticizes you harshly. They expect you to react, to defend yourself, to give them the satisfaction of seeing you shaken. But instead, you remain silent. Not with the silence of fear, but with the silence of those who don't need to prove anything. In that moment, the entire battlefield collapses, because war only exists if there are two sides fighting. If one refuses to enter the game ceases to exist.
Jung understood this deeply. The one who masters themselves doesn't need to conquer anyone else. And silence is the proof of that mastery. It is the voice of inner security. It is the shield that no arrow can pierce. Notice how children sometimes react when faced with silence. If you scold a child and they remain quiet, you soon feel compelled to ask, "Do you understand? Why aren't you saying anything?" The silence disturbs you more than tears or screaming. The same happens with adults. Silence disarms because it cannot be manipulated. It doesn't offer footholds. It doesn't create hooks. It is absolute freedom. Now, understand this. Silence is not repression. It's not swallowing pain. It's not pretending nothing happened. That would be denial. Silence, in the Jungian sense, is recognition. It is knowing that what comes from outside cannot touch the essence of who you are. So there's no need to respond. There's no need to defend yourself. There's no need to waste energy. Think of a mountain. No matter how much the wind howls around it, the mountain doesn't move. No matter how many storms beat against its slopes, it remains there, silent, immovable, sovereign. That's the power of silence. It's not weakness. It's not passivity. It's strength in its purest form.
And when you adopt this silence, something curious happens. The world starts to reveal itself in ways you had never noticed before. You realize how many of the conflicts you used to enter were unnecessary. You realize how many of the battles you fought were borrowed. You realize that most of the noise around you was just people screaming at their own inner ghosts. By not reacting, you stop feeding those ghosts. By not defending yourself, you stop validating attacks. By not justifying yourself, you stop playing the role they assign to you. And little by little, you discover a truth that shakes the very foundations of your identity. You were never really under attack. The offense was just a projection. The attack was just an invitation. The manipulation was just a test. All of them needed your participation to exist. And when you choose silence, you withdraw from the game. You take away the oxygen from the fire. You take away the stage from the drama. You take away the arena from the fight. And that's when you finally see. They can shout, but they can't touch you. They can accuse, but they can't diminish you. They can reject, but they can't erase your essence. Because silence has already taught you that there is nothing to defend. You are whole. You are free. You are untouchable.
There is always a price for discovering that nothing and nobody can truly hurt you. And that price is solitude. At first, it feels like punishment, because since childhood, you've been trained to believe that being alone is proof of failure, that exclusion is death, that to walk without the herd is to be broken. So when you finally stop reacting, when you no longer bend to please, when you no longer betray yourself just to belong, something inevitable happens. People leave. And in the silence that follows, you feel naked, accused, misunderstood. This is the rupture. The old world collapses, the stage empties, and you are left facing yourself. Most people cannot bear this moment.
They run back to the crowd, back to the applause, back to the chains disguised as affection. Because solitude exposes everything they tried to hide. It takes away the distractions. It strips away the masks. It forces you to realize that what you were seeking outside was always within. History shows us this clearly. Every figure who dared to break illusions walked this road of solitude. Socrates, condemned for questioning the truths of Athens. Galileo, silenced for pointing his telescope at the forbidden. Jung himself, distancing from Freud and enduring the loneliness of forging his own path in psychology. To break free from collective illusions is to face abandonment, and only the strong endure it. But here is the paradox. The moment you stop fearing solitude, you stop being alone. Because what you discover is astonishing. The applause you craved was just an echo of your unacknowledged worth. The love you begged for was just the reflection of the love you denied yourself. The validation you waited for was only the mask hiding your true voice. When you no longer depend on others to exist, solitude transforms. The silence that once seemed unbearable becomes music. The absence of company becomes presence. The void becomes space for creation.
Think of a climber ascending a mountain. At the base, the crowd gathers, chatting, sharing warmth. But as the path rises, the air thins, and one by one the companions stay behind, until the climber is alone, facing the wind, the cold, and the silence, but also facing the view that no one else will ever see. That's the solitude of the strong, not abandonment, elevation. And here lies the secret. Solitude disarms manipulation. Because what is the greatest threat used against you? If you don't obey, you'll be left out. If you don't conform, you'll lose us. If you don't bend, you'll walk alone. But when you no longer fear solitude, that threat loses all force. What can they take from someone who has already found freedom in being alone? It's like trying to scare a bird with the promise of losing its cage. What others see as loss, it sees as liberation.
And once you taste that freedom, you can never go back. Because solitude reveals something extraordinary. You are enough. Your company is sufficient. Your essence is whole. And from this fullness, relationships stop being chains and become choices. Love stops being need and becomes overflow. Friendship stops being dependence and becomes encounter. This is why the path of the strong is solitary, not because they reject others, but because they no longer depend on them to survive. They can love without fear. They can walk without applause. They can exist without permission. And when you reach this point, the truth becomes unshakable. The herd can reject you, and you will remain. The crowd can mock you, and you will remain. The world can turn its back, and you will remain. Unmoved, whole, free. There comes a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when the chains fall. Not because someone breaks them, but because you finally realize they were never real. For years, perhaps decades, you lived convinced that you were fragile, that words could wound you, that rejection could diminish you, that failure could define you, that solitude could destroy you. And then, one day, something shifts. You discover that none of this was true,
that the pain you feared was just the echo of your own interpretations, that the attacks you suffered were just projections from others, that the chains that held you were illusions woven by fear. This is the awakening of inner freedom. And once it happens, nothing is ever the same again.
Jung insisted, transformation begins the moment you stop identifying with the mask, the persona. As long as you cling to the image you want to project to the world, you'll always be vulnerable, because any criticism against that mask will hurt you. Any rejection of that role will shake you. Any failure of that character will make you collapse. But the day you realize you are not the mask, everything changes. Because the world can attack the mask, but never your essence. Imagine a stage actor who, at the end of the play, removes the costume. On stage, the audience could boo, mock, throw insults. But once the actor steps backstage and removes the mask, none of that matters anymore. Because the attacks were never directed at him, they were aimed at the character. And the same is true of life. Most of the blows you thought were personal were just blows against a role you were playing.
The awakening is realizing you don't have to keep playing. You can leave the stage. You can step out of the roles others wrote for you. You can finally exist as yourself, unmasked, whole, free. And then the world changes. Not because the world became kinder, but because you became untouchable. Not because people stopped attacking, but because you stopped taking it personally. Not because conflicts disappeared, but because they lost the power to enslave you. At that moment, life becomes lighter. You no longer seek approval in every gesture. You no longer beg for recognition in every word. You no longer fear rejection as if it were death, because you've discovered a secret that few dare to face. You don't need any of this to be complete. And once you embody this truth, you move differently in the world. Your silence speaks louder than arguments. Your solitude radiates more presence than any crowd. Your freedom inspires more courage than any speech.
People begin to notice. They look at you and can't quite explain what has changed. You haven't become richer. You haven't become more powerful. You haven't become someone else. But there is something unshakable in your gaze, something serene in your posture, something magnetic in your way of existing. And deep down, they sense the truth. You are free. This is why the greatest revolution is invisible. It doesn't happen in parliaments or on battlefields. It happens in the depths of the human soul. The day someone discovers that nothing and nobody can hurt them, they become untouchable. And one untouchable individual is more powerful than armies, because they cannot be bought, controlled, or manipulated. Look at history again. Every time a free man or woman rose, empires trembled, because power structures depend on fear. They need you to fear punishment, rejection, solitude. But when someone realizes that none of this can truly wound them, the game ends. The empires lose control, the illusions collapse, and freedom spreads like fire.
That's why Jung's phrase is not just personal wisdom, it's a call to transformation. When you realize nothing and nobody can hurt you, everything changes. Everything. The way you love, the way you work, the way you walk through the world. Because finally, You are not moved by fear, you are moved by truth. And here's the final paradox. When you stop fearing wounds, you stop wounding others. When you stop feeling the need to defend yourself, you stop attacking. When you stop living as a prisoner, you stop imprisoning. Freedom, once awakened in one soul, echoes through many others.
So the question is no longer whether people can hurt you. The question is whether you are ready to awaken, to remove the mask, to embrace solitude, to choose silence, to discover once and for all that you were free all along. And when that day comes, when the illusion of fear collapses and the truth of your essence emerges, you'll see with clarity. The world hasn't changed. You have. And that is enough to change everything.
So I ask you, how much longer will you keep handing out the keys to your peace? How much longer will you react to every attack as if it defines your destiny? Maybe it's time to stop, to let go of the illusion of vulnerability, to finally embody the truth that Jung pointed to. Because when you realize that nothing and nobody can hurt you, everything changes. You lose people who only valued your fragility, but you gain yourself. You abandon the chains of fear, but you inherit the wings of authenticity. And in that new state, you become rare, untouchable, whole. Not because the world is kinder, but because you finally remembered who you are. So tell me, are you ready to live as if nothing and nobody has the power to harm you? Are you ready to walk through life without fear, without masks, without permission? If this touched you, write in the comments, "I am untouchable." Let's see how many here are ready to embody this transformation. And don't stop now. The next step is essential. Keep watching the next video. I'll see you there.